If you had $1 for every time someone asked you about the Sony FX3 on the creator, how much money would you have?
I wouldn't be rich, but I could buy a few FX3s.
This is Oren Soffer, an award-winning cinematographer who recently shot the feature film The Creator. The film was on the shortlist for Best Cinematography at the BAFTAs and was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Oren has also shot dozens of commercials and music videos for clients like Avicii, Nike, HBO, and many more.
People need to realize is that this was an $80 million studio film. If the FX3 cost $50,000, we would have shot it. We wanted to go to a village in Thailand and just take out a camera and start filming. We wanted to integrate real people, almost kind of documentary style, and create a world for the film that felt grounded and real.
Was there any shot that you guys took that couldn't be tracked?
I mean, it's incredible work. The team should have won the Best Visual Effects Oscar.
There's so many more AI models coming out, so many more people using them. I want to know where you stand on this.
I am very much in favor of any tool and any technology that makes a workflow more efficient. What I cannot get behind is...
I gotta take it all the way back. I want to know, what did you do right in your life to be the man you are today? Oren, welcome to the Bad Decisions podcast.
Hey, happy to be here. Let's make some good decisions.
Come on, it's supposed to be about the bad decisions, man. It's like the name.
Right,
like
but so
right
we
up
learn
there.
from the bad decisions so that we make good decisions in the future.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. I mean, we talk about that sometimes with the guests. The whole idea of the name was, you know, a lot of the things that you do in your life, they start as bad decisions because people around you always tell you, hey, don't do that. That's not good. You know, don't quit school. Don't take this job. But it's always going to turn out well if you know what you're going after, if you believe in yourself. So that's the whole idea behind the bad decision.
100%, because ultimately bad and good are just subjective. Everything is just a decision, and we have to trust our gut. This is the biggest thing I've learned. And so, you know, a bad decision for one person is a good decision for another. It's all a matter of perspective.
I love that. I love that. You know what? For Bad Decisions intro, one day I'm going to cut this up and put in the intro so people know why Bad Decisions was there.
Use that as your promo, but I do need 10% of every future podcast.
Oh, man. We should have talked about the content. Do we have our lawyers here? Come on, we should have... See, you're a professional. I forgot about that.
See, we're learning from bad decisions right now.
That's the first bad decision made on this podcast.
We lost 10% already in the beginning. Well, Oren, it's great to have you here, man. You know, you're an amazing cinematographer. You know, we watched The Creator, and we've been following some of your work now. We stalked you a little bit as well on Instagram, see all of your posts, and there's so much to learn from, and there's so much to talk about today. But I got to take it all the way back because, you know, clearly we want to learn from your journey. Let's talk about when you were a teenager, perhaps. And I want to know, what did you do right in your life to be the man you are today? How was it like being young Oren in college, maybe?
Ooh, well, college. I don't feel like I was that young when I was in college. I'm like, college. I was already an adult. I was like, you want to go back? Take you back to childhood. I think there's
well, you know,
more
I gotta
formative
say
things.
one thing. Sorry to interrupt. If you want to take it all the way back, if you think that's the best place to begin, please, you're more than welcome to do so.
Well, yeah. So on the day I was born, I
picked up a camera and started shooting.
Well, yeah. So I think the thing is the reason I would take it back further is because by the time I got to college, I already knew what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So
that's amazing. So my desire to pursue a career in film, and even specifically cinematography, was already fully formed by the time I got to college. So all the steps that I took in order to get to that place where I was arriving at, I went to NYU Film School, Tisch School of the Arts, and I went to film school, and I already knew I wanted to make films and work in the film industry, and I loved movies, and I loved cinematography, so I already knew all of that by the time I got there. But the steps that I followed in order to get to that place started earlier, for sure. And I think my interest in filmmaking really started when I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old. I mean, I think, well, you know, at that age, I wasn't thinking about acting on filmmaking, but I was interested in the filmmaking process. And I was actually just taking a trip down memory lane the other day because I have my photo albums from around this time. And when I was 9 years old, my family took a trip to California. and we did we did all of the state, but the formative part happened in Los Angeles because I remember, and I have the photos to prove it, visiting Universal Studios, doing the studio tour and the stunts show and the special effects show and all that stuff, and then going to the Chinese theater and seeing the handprints. And that was, I think, the start. Like by that point, I was already interested not just in movies, but in how movies were made and like the behind the scenes and the people who made them, and starting to get an understanding of that. I don't think I still connected the dots that I could do that, but at the very least, I started showing the interest in that. And then in middle school, by the time I was, 12, 13, by that point, my friends and I were making little movies on mini DV camera. Or it actually wasn't mini DV, sorry. It was just a camcorder. So it was like, it was a digital magnetic tape, like off the shelf. It was my dad's camcorder. And I remember, we did music video recreations. I wish I had all this stuff. I wish I scanned it. We recreated Red Hot Chili Peppers music videos.
Wow.
Nice.
It was all lo-fi. Like, did you ever see the movie Be Kind, Rewind? Michel Gondry.
I haven't seen that.
No.
I haven't seen that.
Terrific movie. So one of the concepts in that movie is that the characters in the movie, the premise is that I don't actually remember the plot details, but they run a video store and all the videos are taken away. So they have to recreate all of the movies in their video store, but with no budget. So they call it...
Wow, such a cool concept.
It's great. It's hilarious. It's with Jack Black. Great movie. Underrated. And so they call it sweeting. So they're sweeting the movies. And so the whole movie is them just recreating classic films with zero budget, like with cardboard and miniature car chases and like shitty costumes. So anyway, this was before the movie came out. This movie came out by the time I was in college. But when I was 10 years prior to that, my friends and I were sweeting movies already. We were doing no budget. It's not even low budget. It's literally like
no budget,
because it's just, we were doing it with stuff that we just had around the house. Like we weren't like buying things or investing money. We did like Matrix parodies, and we would recreate music videos, Red Hot Chili Peppers music videos, and we were editing in camera because we didn't have editing software or a computer. So you would shoot a shot of somebody and then cut and then turn around and shoot the other shot. And then cut and then turn around and go back to the other one, so that when you then rewound the tape and press play, you would watch the whole thing in order. So those were the early days. And I think it sort of just grew from there. We had, I was very lucky. We had a filmmaking class in high school. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, now it was still pretty cheap and pretty lo-fi compared to what it would be today, because this was in 2003. I'm aging myself right now. And so we did not have state-of-the-art equipment. We did have one mini DV camera that we all had to share. But so the technical quality was not high, but that was my first exposure to fundamental concepts of filmmaking. Wide shot, medium shot, close up, telephoto lens, wide angle lens, like different, all the basics. And at that point, I was also inhaling filmmaking books, which I still have on my shelf. The 5 C's of cinematography and directing, shot for shot. These are all the staples. And so by the time I graduated high school and was getting ready to go to college, I already knew. By the time I got to the end of it, I was like, filmmaking, cinematography, this is what I want to do. I'm dead set on it. So, college I view less as a discovery period and more as the start of my professional career, really. And other things were still pretty lo-fi in college too. Don't get me wrong, but it definitely was. The idea was fully formed in my head by that point, pretty much. Yeah.
Were your family supportive of the idea of going to the art school and pursuing cinematography?
They were. And I'm very grateful for that and very thankful. I know that that's not the case for a lot of people, but, I think I would describe them as skeptically supportive. Like,
That's a good category.
yeah, they definitely were supportive fully, but I think we're also just skeptical and also just didn't really know what an actual career would look like. You know, how does one actually make money doing this, and how does one, you know, create something sustainable? And I think the most excited my family ever got at up to a certain point. Obviously, now they understand. They went to see.
Yeah, I know. Come on. If they're still skeptical, then there's.
They get it now. They get it. But in the early years, you know, it takes time to get things going. So in the early years, the most excited they got was when I went back to. I took a teaching job at Tisch, and as an adjunct professor. This was for about 2 years, just to make money while I was pursuing cinematography. And I think that was the happiest they had been up until a certain point. They were like, a teacher, an adjunct professor, a teaching job. This is great. Stability, guaranteed income. You know, I have a lot of professors in my family, so they understand that job. So yeah, that was that was many years ago. I mean, at this point, they really do understand it. But
Let me ask you a question. Then, talking about the bad decision, right? I'm sure when your parents or maybe your friends at the time were skeptical, you might have also had those thoughts where you were thinking to yourself, "Is this going to work out? Am I sure about this?" Of course, you said that at an early age, you knew this is the path you wanted to follow, but everybody has doubts, of course, at different times. I wanted to know if that occurred to you as well, those doubts, and how did you overcome them when people were skeptical?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think I didn't have any doubts at the time, at least not when you're going into school. I mean, film school, in hindsight also, it's funny. Part of this, I can recognize now that part of this is an illusion that is intentionally created by film schools. But they're really designed for you not to feel skeptical or worry really about anything going into it. I mean, the film school is designed to be encouraging and a positive creative environment, and, like, you know, really make you believe that you can accomplish anything. And I definitely drank that Kool-Aid at the time. And you go into it without a care in the world. Like, you don't really think about what does this look like professionally? What does a career look like? What are the steps I need to take? And the school, I think, for better and worse, really insulates you from thinking about that, at least up until maybe, you know, your final few months in senior year. And even then, they only do a very basic job at trying to expose you to what, you know, a career would look like. They keep the experience very pure and very creativity focused and learning focused, which I actually do think is the right thing. I think that's correct. But so at the time, you're not really thinking about it. I think the worry and the worries about how is this going to go and what do I need to do and was this the right thing and all that comes after you graduate from film school, not during and not before. You know, it's once you graduate and then you're, you know, a year out, 2 years out, still trying to understand, like, am I doing the right things? Am I taking the right steps? Am I making the kind of progress that I want for myself? That's the hardest period, I think, is and if you don't go to school, which a lot of people don't go to film school, which is totally fine, it's still the same thing, like that early period of the career. Once you've made the decision, making the decision is easy. It's then getting through the lean years, as I call them, and many people call them. That's the hard part. That's the real test.
Wow. How did you navigate those first few years right after finishing the college?
I mean, it's not easy, and I think you take it day by day, and you focus on the positive, and you focus on the projects that do come across your desk, and you focus on the things that are within your control. And it's very easy for me now in hindsight to look back and say that, because at the time it's not that easy to act on this advice. It's very easy to get distracted by comparison and anxieties about, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Am I meeting the right people? Am I making the right choices? And I think all of that is normal, and it's a normal part of the process. But I think the only way to navigate it is one step at a time, and not wavering in your confidence in yourself. And I mean, at the end of the day, this sounds kind of glib, but there's a truth to it. I navigated, and I'm sure other people do as well, because I didn't have a backup plan. Like, there's nothing else. I don't really have another skill set. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in film production. Like, that's not going to get me a job anywhere else. I was never good at math. I don't really have, I can't go into engineering or anything technical. So this is kind of all I can do. So I guess I really don't have a choice but to keep going, pretty much.
Dude, listen, that's a fantastic thing. I mean, I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who said it. I hate plan Bs. There's no point having a plan B because you're always thinking about falling back and having a safety net. Of course, it's good to sometimes, depending on the case, play it safe.
Yeah.
But more often than not, I feel like it's better for you to just go all in into what you believe is right for you and try to make that work, because otherwise you'll regret it. And in this case, I mean, you've done a fantastic job. And I want to get a little bit more specific with that.
Wait, listen. Did you know that you can create highly photorealistic scenes with photogrammetry by taking in what exists in the real world into 3D?
We've been using Polycam to do exactly that, using our phone and drone.
Yes, that's right. And guess what? They sponsored this video to give you guys 30% off their pro plan. So you guys can go ahead and try it for yourself.
Use the code BADDECISIONS in the link in the description.
You did mention how during film school they did prepare you creatively, but not necessarily for how to get the jobs right after, how you navigate those roads. So what was the exact thing that you did? Were you actually working at the same time that you were in film school, or were you just focusing on the projects, and then after film school you only realized, oh shit, now I need to get myself into a project? How did that look like?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the transition, so one advantage of film school, especially NYU, and I can only really speak to Tisch, NYU, I can't really speak about other film schools, but what was really great about NYU Tisch is that the entire program is designed in a way that gets you as a freshman in front of upperclassmen. There's a lot of encouragement because there's so many projects that happen at the school, which is unlike some other film schools where there's a selection process of which films get produced. At NYU, anybody who wants to direct a film can direct, and every class has 250 people. So in any given year, there are literally hundreds of student films being produced at the junior level and the senior level. So all of those films need crew. And the way the school is really set up is it's set up to encourage lowerclassmen, freshmen and sophomores, to crew on upperclassmen films. And that way, A, gaining on-set experience on student films, and B, meeting upperclassmen who, by the time we are now seniors, they've already graduated and they're already working in the real world. And so it creates basically a constantly lowering ladder where the people who graduate then start working on various projects outside of school. Let's say as cinematographers. So for example, there are some cinematographers that I would have pulled focus or second A seed or gripped, even though I was terrible at gripping, on their student films when they were seniors and I was a freshman or a sophomore. So now by the time they are out of school, they're now working professionally at the early stages of their career. So lower budget projects, smaller things, and they're hiring seniors or recent graduates to come onto those projects, to crew, to be focus pullers and do the same thing. So that way the ladder keeps lowering. And so the transition, if you've sort of played your cards right, and if you have gone on student films and worked on student films and met upperclassmen, there is a nice transition out. So when I graduated, there was a pool of working cinematographers. And again, these were kind of smaller, low budget projects, music video here, a lot of web series were going at the time. Like this was right during, I guess we were kind of lucky with this timing. This was right during what's called the pivot to video bubble, where in hindsight, it was revealed that Facebook was cooking the numbers. I don't know if you guys know about all this, but every online media company was encouraged by Facebook and other platforms to pivot to video. Everybody was like, text content is out, video content is in. Everybody needs video.
Right.
YouTube is surging.
Right.
YouTube monetization just started. Like this was new. And Facebook video was like, Facebook Watch was huge. The numbers were crazy. And then later everyone found out that the numbers were being inflated by Facebook.
Damn.
But at the time, everyone was pivoting to video. So I was doing shoots for like Bon Appetit, Weight Watchers, a bunch of other like online publications basically that were, I mean, now it's quite common that everybody has a little video component, BuzzFeed and this and that. But at the time it was new. And all of this was for the web and it was very cheap. I mean, these were like shot on DSLRs, really small crews, not great pay. So perfect jobs for just out of film school kids. You know, College Humor was doing a lot of stuff at that time.
Yes.
So there was a lot of work there, and so I had a few cinematographer mentors basically when I was in school that I had worked for that would then hire me on as an operator or focus puller. We did a bunch of stuff. Like for 2 years, I had a fairly regular gig with somebody for Maybelline. Once a month, we would do makeup tutorials for YouTube. So again, this is like pretty dry content, but it was work. And it was a way to make money while I was pursuing my own cinematography opportunities at the time, which were also low budget, various web series and music videos and a few spec commercials, low budget stuff, and a couple of features as well, very low budget features, and short films. So all of that just kind of continued in the years after. And it definitely took a few years to kind of find the footing and find a way. Like at that time, I think the hardest thing to figure out is you're doing all these kind of low budget or amateur projects, and the thing that feels attainable but just out of reach is, okay, but how do I take this up to a professional level? Like how do I shoot the professional stuff that I see other people doing? Like, meanwhile I'm here with a 5D, you know, shooting makeup tutorials. Like, how do I bridge that gap? That's a tricky thing to kind of figure out how to get past. And that's the one that the only way to cope with that is just having that belief in yourself and that faith that with enough time and patience and perseverance, and continuing to just do good work and improve and learn and grow as an artist, that you will get to that place. The path will reveal itself. And it did. So I guess I was right, but it's a tough thing because there are no specific steps that you have to take. I mean, it's like everybody's journey is a little bit different, but you just sort of have to have that somewhat blind faith in yourself. Even if it feels naive or if it feels delusional at times, like you just have to believe. I mean, I know it sounds corny, but like, I think it's true.
I love that. The way you described it was amazing. And I know so many people feel that way, not just specifically in your industry, but in other industries as well. And I think Farah might agree with me here. While you were talking about the education system that you were in, I found a really exciting contrast that I want to talk about, which was the way that the education system was set up in where you studied. It helped people find a network where you would use that network after you graduated and help each other out, get better jobs and work as a team. Because we have a lot of 3D artists watching this channel and listening to the podcast. And sometimes you talk about education and the people that come on the podcast say, you know what, for example, if you want to become a 3D artist, you know, the traditional way of education is not really that important. You can learn things much quicker online. The softwares update all the time.
Yes.
And so it's much quicker for you to learn that way, and you can find your network online. But now that I think about it, in your industry, like if you want to be a cinematographer, it helps so much to follow the path that you did, specifically because of the network, right? Because of the amount of people that you find. You cannot, I assume finding all of the people that you've met in school online would be much more difficult. And so it's invaluable what you've gathered in film school, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is filmmaking is still an in-person activity for the most part. And so a major component of it is interpersonal relationships, and not just, you know, because you could have interpersonal relationships online. I mean, even just this, like we're talking, and interacting and meeting each other, but it's different because you have to physically work together in a space, right? And so it's not just about interpersonal relationships, it's about group dynamic. It's about physical interactivity, meeting people in person, working with people in person. Like online, I mean, it's certainly possible, and I do know people who didn't go to film school and who launched their careers online and through Instagram and through being self-taught, and all of that is completely valid and very possible. I would say I agree. I think it's probably harder for this exact reason, because it's hard through that way to kind of prove or show what you're like in person, and ultimately filmmaking is an in-person activity. So at some point that does have to translate, and many people find a way, but I reckon it probably is harder. Yeah, and whereas with 3D artists or editorial or post or graphic design or anything like that, it's different because those are jobs that, especially nowadays, are very much conducted online anyway. Like even we worked with ILM on The Creator, and even a big post house like that, most of their work is remote now anyway. Like it, just because of the pandemic and all sorts of other things, like, you know, people have realized, like, well, why do we, that type of office job? I mean, filmmaking isn't an office job. Like being on set, being in production is very different. Whereas post is kind of similar to an office job. Like you go to a physical space and and people realize, the value of being at home and being with their families and not having to travel and being able to work from anywhere. So I think, like, as time has gone on, those jobs like 3D and VFX and all that, like, it becomes a lot more comfortable to do that like this. And so that also opens up new opportunities for people who are self-taught or are just at home somewhere, which is great. But filmmaking is different. Production is different, I guess I should say, because production, you got to be somewhere physically with other people.
Yes.
So yeah, I do agree. I think the network part is massive. I think that's really everything. And I do know people who've managed without it. I mean, I have a buddy who, he never went to film school. He showed up in New York City one day with two pennies in his pocket, and basically started walking around the streets and knocking on the doors of production trucks and introducing himself and offering himself as a PA. And now he's a cinematographer. He's a working cinematographer. So, it just goes to show, like, some people just have the gumption and have the ability to, like, do that without anything. And I really admire that. I don't know if I could do that, but it's cool that somebody has succeeded that way,
Wow.
I love that.
You mentioned at early days of your career, especially after school, you were working on projects, but you were looking at the future where you wanted to take those professional job, or let's call it the high budget feature films. When was the first moment that you realized that, okay, I moved past that step and now all the patience and the perseverance really was worth it and I made it?
I don't know if I've reached that moment yet.
Oh my God.
Man, come on.
I don't know if I've reached that moment yet, because the honest truth is that the goalposts, they keep moving.
Yes.
So
that's true.
So each milestone, I mean, I distinctly remember my mom visited me in New York like 1 or 2 years after graduation. And we were sitting at a diner in New York and talking about career and everything and how things were going. And I told her then, I was like, I just really remember this. I was like, I'll be satisfied when I can reach a point where I'm making enough money from cinematography that I don't have to do any other jobs in throughout the course of the year. I can just make money from that. Like, that's the goal that I'm trying to hit. And the first year that I accomplished that was 2018. 2019, sorry. 2019 was the first year that I didn't do any other set jobs. I didn't camera operate. I wasn't a camera assistant. I had left my adjunct job at NYU. And from January 1st to December 31st, my only income in the year 2019 was from cinematography. So I achieved that goal. But now the thing is when you get to 2019, and I've done that, you get to the end of it, and now you're like, okay, this was cool. This was great. But my goals already moved, because now it's like I want to shoot bigger commercials, you know, and I want to join the union, and I want to shoot union commercials, and I want to get bigger budgets, and I want to shoot studio movies and all of these things, right? So, you know, now cut to I've done all those things.
Yeah.
You know, and
So where is it now?
And I shot a studio movie, so now it's like, okay, well, I've shot one studio movie, and I was a co-cinematographer. So, and now I need to shoot a solo studio movie, and I need to continue the momentum of that, you know, and make sure it doesn't slow down. And I still have all these goals and commercials that I haven't done. So, the point is that I think this is a good thing, by the way, because I think this is the motivator. This is what keeps you going. Is like there's always an ambition to kind of reach for something that's a little bit further, and stretch and challenge yourself in that way. But I do think it's important, and I've definitely fallen into this trap before, and I'm trying to be better at not. It's important to look back and acknowledge the things that you have accomplished up until that point, because it's easy to forget that and then only focus on what you don't have yet, you know, and the aspirational side of it, which is good as a motivator, but you do have to remind yourself to look back and appreciate how far you've come. So
wow, I really love this mentality. This is a winner mindset when you don't really stick to a goal and stay stagnant. After you reach something, you are aiming for a bigger goal, and every year and every quarter you're looking for something bigger. And I think that really shows in your career how you can move forward, how you can take bigger projects. I think that's an amazing mindset to have for anybody, not only in this industry, but in any industry.
yeah. And by the way, I think there's a potential trap with the mindset, because if it's focused only on bigger and on growth, at some point it stops.
Yeah.
You know, at some point you reach the peak, and then you're like, well, where do I go from here?
What do you? Okay, that's actually quite interesting, because I feel like maybe you can always set something higher as long as the goal is not monetary, right? Because monetary, I feel like at some point, yeah, you're like, okay, I already have enough, right? I've already gotten everything I want. But in terms of career, do you think there is a peak? Do you think there's always something new to learn?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll use Greg Fraser as an example here, because obviously I've worked with him and all that. So, you know, and I'm not speaking on his behalf. This is more just as an outside observer. So I don't actually know how he feels about this, but this is just me speculating and using him as an example. You know, Greg, over the last few years, won an Oscar. He's shot the biggest movies. He's shot Dune, The Batman, Dune Part 2, etc. Like, that to me is the peak. Like, you are operating at the highest level of cinematography, right? So then if once you reach that point, let's say where I'm sitting right now, I look at that and say, well, in 14 years, I want to reach that point. Okay, so let's say I get to 48, 50, and I'm there.
Right.
I still have 20 more years left at least in my career. So then the question becomes, where do you go from there? And that's why I think the sole focus on growth has a limit. It has a ceiling. So what's more important is continuing to stay curious and interested. I think, and again, I can sort of just speak as an observer from Greg, is like where you go from there is you now start to look at different things. Like what is challenging me? What is something I haven't done yet? You know, maybe once you reach that point where you're doing massive blockbuster after massive blockbuster after massive blockbuster, the new challenge is, can I go back and shoot like a small indie film, you know? Ooh. But now with all of the experience that I have, because I think that would be really interesting. The budget is going down to a super low budget movie. Or, you know, I don't know. That's what I mean is it's like, it's hard to imagine what that is until you get there. But the point is it's less about growth from a size perspective and more about growth from a depth perspective. Like, how do I deepen my artistry, my interest, my challenging myself and that kind of thing. And I think that maintaining that and having constantly moving goalposts in that regard is really important, because what this is it's sort of like, you know, it's not imagining it as a mountain where you kind of get to the top. It's more about like a pathway, and it's it's winding and it's complex, and it's sometimes it goes uphill, sometimes it goes downhill, sometimes it goes left and right. But the important thing is to always find some new thing to reach towards. And it doesn't necessarily need to be up. Like I think that's sort of the fallacy is that the idea of constant growth can lead to stagnation. And I think that that's something I want to avoid. But as of right now, I definitely have growth ambitions because I feel like I've
It's
taken...
not time to go down. Yeah, we got to go up right now.
Not yet. Right now, like next 10 years,
All the way
it's
up.
up.
Yeah.
It's up. Yeah. So that's the goal.
You know, when that happens, when you talk about, I don't know, in 10, 15 years, we're going to have another episode of the podcast, right? Episode 2000 something. And we're going to talk about what's
you're
the
at
next...
the peak now. You're at the peak now. What's next?
The next challenge? I feel like, I mean, I totally agree with you. That's why I even brought up the point, because I feel like some people do this. Like some actors try and give a go at writing or directing. You know, they completely switch the roles. I feel like whenever you feel stagnant, or when you said the growth becomes a trap, the best thing you can do, if you're really good at what you do and everybody respects you, it's time to go and do something maybe you're not respected in, right? Because you're weak again, right? And as humans, I feel like that's a very strong emotion to push you to learn something new, because those are the moments where I think life is most fun, and you suffer the most as well, of course, because no one thinks you're good. You're probably shit at it. And especially at an older age, it's more difficult to have that feeling because, again, you've already gained that respect over the years. But it's, I think, a very special power to be able to humble yourself once again at different levels in your life, to take on a whole new challenge where you're not good, and then you become good at that too. And then that way you'll become this wise old person who's done multiple things in their life. I feel like that would be the way I want to live my life, at least.
Yeah, I relate to that.
It's awesome. I don't know about Farhad. I want to talk a little bit about the creator, or do you have anything you want to talk about before?
I want to first start. How did Oren get into the creator? so what was what was the?
We have to.
How did that happen?
Well, it's actually not a very interesting story, but basically, you know, I had met Greg Fraser, who was my co-cinematographer on the creator many years ago, and for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know, even though I already mentioned, Greg has shot the Batman, Dune Part 1 and 2, Rogue One, Lion, Foxcatcher, Zero Dark 30, bunch of just incredible movies, and so I've looked up to him for a long time, admired his work, had a chance to meet him and get to know him and sort of become acquainted, and then over the years he kept tabs on my work. I would send him new work, and we had a bit of a kind of mentorship going on, unofficial. And kind of out of the blue, he called me for this because he was looking for a co-cinematographer to bring on because he wasn't going to be able to do the whole project. So Gareth Edwards was the director of the creator, also directed Rogue One, and Greg had worked with Gareth on Rogue One. So they were working together on this project, looking to bring on an additional cinematographer to fill an availability gap because of Dune Part 2. So yeah, it was purely logistics, but Greg had been keeping tabs on my work and my growth over the years, and I think obviously I'm very flattered and honored to have been thought of for this and to have been brought onto it. And they really kind of gave me this opportunity, and that's really it.
Okay, so before we get into the details, I want to ask you some a really fun question. So this is something, because me and Farah have been discussing this. I just want to know, how much money would you have if you had $1, right, for every time someone asked you about the Sony FX3 usage on the creator? How much money would you have? How rich would you be right now?
I wouldn't be, if I had $1 for every time it came up, I wouldn't be rich, but I could buy a few FX3s.
So the thing is, I know, you even mentioned it yourself, right? This is a very interesting topic for the general audience because they haven't seen things like that. And for you guys, what I found interesting was through some of the interviews that decision was made not because of the price tag of the camera, but because you guys thought it fit the situation well. So maybe, before we get into the nitty gritty, I think it's best heard from yourself of why you guys went ahead and chose that camera. Because again, a lot of people think it's because of the price tag alone.
Yeah. I mean,
I think people need to realize is that this was an $80 million studio film. So we could have shot on whatever camera we wanted. And as Gareth has said in past interviews, if the FX3, if that camera cost $50,000, we would have shot on it. Because it wasn't about the price. It was about having a small, tiny little camera with a tiny footprint that we could use that would influence having a small crew so that we could be nimble and on our feet and shoot the movie in the way that Gareth wanted to, which was all about creating a small footprint and a fast working pace in order to be able to shoot on location in remote locations in Southeast Asia, mostly in Thailand, and create a footprint of production that felt very guerrilla and very immersive and very organic and very authentic. Because the issue with the big machinery of filmmaking is that the more big machines you have, the more easily things start to feel artificial. And what Gareth wanted was authenticity. And he wanted to go to a village in Thailand and just take out a camera and start filming. We didn't want to set up lights. We didn't want to bring in actors besides our main actors. We wanted to integrate real people, almost kind of documentary style, and create a world for the film, a science fiction world that felt grounded and real. So that's what the camera was for, because the minute, it's so funny how quickly the knock-on effects of having bigger equipment is, and I just mean by physical size. Like the minute you have a bigger camera, you need a bigger truck to transport it. You have more cases, more boxes, and you need more crew to support it. Every one of those decisions has a knock-on effect. Even just moving it from one place to the other takes more effort and more time than a smaller camera. I know it sounds so silly and obvious to say that out loud, but that really is what went into the decision. And yeah, the FX3 was just the right camera at that time that was capable of delivering the image that we needed, because we needed a high quality image to be able to put the film in theaters, and it got an IMAX release and all of that. So needed a high quality image that in the smallest and lightest weight possible camera body, and that was the FX3.
Actually, I have a very important question that just popped up. Who has the final say on what camera has to be used for the film? And I want to know, because especially now that you had this experience and how much it's affected, the magic in the film.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next films, is this something you're going to recommend, the people you're going to work with, that, not the Sony FX3 necessarily, but to go with this leaner approach?
Yeah. Ultimately, the cinematographer does have a lot of influence on that decision. You of course need buy-in from the director. Ideally, they are contributing to the decision and understanding it and understanding the implications and the repercussions of it and the approval. And then on a studio level, often you will need the studio to approve, because they ultimately are in charge of distribution. They need to confirm that the quality will be, at the level that it needs to be and all that. But all of those things can be demonstrated just by shooting test footage and projecting it. It's a whole process, but ultimately everybody does kind of need to approve it. Some studios are very specific, like Netflix sort of famously has a list of approved cameras, because they have a 4K mandate in order to deliver 4K to their which is something they promise to their customers. Is if you have the 4K subscription, they say, well, we want to guarantee that you're getting a 4K image. Now, of course, we I don't want to get into the technical, but that's somewhat of a fallacy, because the acquisition format has little to do with the actual resolution of something, because resolution is relative. Resolution is something is about the eye, it's about perception, whereas K, the number of pixels, does not really have anything to do with resolution, because you could have a 4K image that is technically 4096 pixels, but is blurry, because you use like a crappy lens or something. So like that's a low resolution image, no matter how many pixels it has. So anyway,
they fulfilled their promise still, right?
Well, yes, but the point the point is they could use whatever camera they want, because ultimately, if the promise is just 4096 pixels, you can get that you can up resolution, something shot on, for example, HD, and if it's a high quality camera, it'll look fine. But this is a unnecessary rant that I'm going down. This has been over litigated by many other people in other contexts. But the point is that it was the form factor, it was the size and shape, and studios do end up needing to approve it. This was an unorthodox choice, but we did our testing, we shot tests, we proved it to the studio that it would be viable, and they approved it.
Wow.
I love it.
And talking about the shot test, you went on a 4-month trip for tech scouting, for the location scouting all over Southeast Asia, right?
It's called True Love.
True Love, yeah. We saw it on your Instagram that the whole journey was called True Love.
Well, the film was originally called True Love.
Oh.
Right, that's why Project True Love then.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the original title of the movie was called True Love. So the whole shoot,
Okay.
it was True Love. The Creator was a title that came about later in marketing. So they changed the title. I still prefer the original title. I have to
True Love.
True Love.
I have to admit, I
And
do
then-
prefer it. It's provocative, but yeah. So the scouting process happens before the film. So we were scouting for about 4 months. This was mostly in Thailand. We scouted in Cambodia as well, but and the scouting is not full time. So we're also prepping the movie at the same time. So we're doing lighting tests, planning sessions, scheduling, like it's all happening at the same time, and the scouts are happening in between all of those other processes.
But then we saw some of the shots that you guys took during the scouting time ended up in the final film as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Does that
really-
happen often in movies?
I wouldn't
like
say
this?
often, but it does happen. On Elvis, for example, Mandy Walker, the cinematographer on that, and Baz Luhrmann, they shot a lot of test footage of Austin Butler as Elvis in the costume and rehearsals and testing his performance and his movements and his actually a lot of that footage is in the movie. So it's not
That's
unheard
amazing.
of. People do use test footage and scout footage in the final film. That we're not the first people to do that, but it is always fun. I do like when that happens. I just think it's cool.
I agree with you. If I wanted to talk a little bit about the tech scouting, how rigorous was the pre-planning and the pre-production in that stage, and recording all the test footages, the hours that you guys put in?
Yeah.
You know, I want to get a little bit into the details of that.
Yeah, well, for people who might not be super familiar with film production, the pre-production or prep for short is the most important part of the process, because that's really where most of the work happens. Once you're actually on set, it's like a moving train. Like there's only so much you can do. But a big part of it is you're kind of just along for the ride. Like you've basically, I guess the best analogy is it's like dominoes. It's like setting up a beautiful domino display. And so prep is the work of actually setting up the dominoes. It's the designing, like what is the design I'm going to do? Figuring out, okay, so if this is my design, which color pieces do I need? Where do they need to be placed? How far apart do they need to be placed? Maybe testing the knock-on effect, like seeing how fast they can collapse. Like all of that stuff happens in the planning process and the preparation process. And then the film shoot itself is just knocking down the first domino. And then once you've done that, the whole thing just goes, and you can't really stop. Like you can't change things. You can't really plan. I mean, you can to a certain extent. Like, I guess the best analogy would be like, once the dominoes are already falling, you can still add some to the end if you but you're not, but it is already falling. So like,
Yes.
there's only so much you can add.
Right.
But so that's how important the pre-production is. Like shooting a film is very much like that. Like it's all in the planning and it's all in the pre-production. So the more thorough you can be, the better. So we try to visit every single filming location that we go to.
Wow.
Which in this movie, in The Creator, was quite a few. I think there's over 100 locations in the movie.
Wow.
Wow.
We try to we have a lighting plan. We have a design and a plan for every scene. We test as much of it as we can. We test how things look on camera. We have to test the color
and the editing process and the color grading and everything. So all of that goes through testing, visual effects tests, everything gets tested
Right.
so that when you then go in to execute it on the day, there's a familiarity. Like, oh, we've done this before. We thought about this. We planned it. We're not just winging it.
Right.
And there's a little bit of winging it always. There's always a location you couldn't get to, or a location falls through and you have to replace it at the last minute. Things like that happen all the time. Or you plan to be here at this time of day, but because you were delayed earlier, you're late, and so now you have to rethink something for later. All of that is also part of the process. But the more planning you do in prep, the easier it is to pivot when things change. Yeah.
We saw how much planning actually went through it, because you published a series of 10 episodes of posts on your Instagram.
Fabulous.
Called Inside the Creator. First of all, great job. We've never seen anything like that before.
Oh.
The way you went through all the details, all the insight that you provided, and with the screenshots, with the screens from the movie, what was the motivation behind sharing all those information? Because I think it took a lot of your time to going through all those details.
Yeah,
By the way, great job. Please do that more.
Well, I think I'm just a filmmaking nerd, deep down. Like, this kind of goes back to when I was 9 years old and I was inspired by the behind the scenes of Jurassic Park and Star Wars and Back to the Future, and just having access to that material, like, really inspired me to go into filmmaking and be interested in it. So I think a part of me just wants to continue that, and provide that kind of inspiration for other people. And also there's a part of me that's just a nerd about it, and that, I just like the behind the scenes details, and I think certain ways that we achieve things are really cool and interesting, and I just want to share them with the world because it's fun to share things that you're interested in and find cool. And there's also an element of it of that I'm just proud of it. I'm proud of the work, and I'm proud of the process, and I think it's also cool and good to share things that you're proud of, and to show your work, and I really firmly believe in education and inspiration for people, and being transparent about those things, and I just think it's cool. I think filmmaking is cool, and I think it's fun to share it, to share the process.
It's awesome. I mean, for anybody that hasn't looked at it yet, I'm just going to tell you, there's so much problem solving happening, and you see that in every post because you've numbered the carousel photos.
10 image per episode, and there are 10 episodes. So you will get at least, I would say, 90 or 100
different
tips.
problem solving puzzles.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's all puzzles, and you talk about how you guys lit different scenes, and especially the exterior shots at night. I love those, and that's what I want to ask you. I mean, during the Tech Scout especially, and while you guys started shooting, due to the unpredictable nature of the shoot, I mean, first of all, you guys are in Thailand, but for Thailand and Cambodia and other countries, we've lived in Malaysia for more than a decade. We know it's hot as hell, right? There's a lot of rain.
It's
humid.
unpredictable. It's
So
unpredictable.
hot.
How would
You guys were shooting in a tunnel at some
I was
point.
like, oh my god, that should be so humid. It's
that
crazy.
tunnel was hell. That was the hottest. That was the hottest part of the shoot. Yeah, I mean, look, there's an element again of, because production is in person and physical, that's sort of baked into it a little bit. Like, you sort of acknowledge that when you're on location, there are going to be elements, mainly the elements, as in nature, that are outside of our control. Now, that's not to say they're unpredictable, because they can be predicted. To a certain extent, you can predict, well, it's going to be hot, so we can prepare for that. You can predict, well, we don't know exactly when it's going to rain, but it could rain, so we can be prepared for if it rains. Here's what we'll do. So it goes back to planning. It's just about knowing, planning and understanding like what could happen and thinking about what we do. And then also taking certain steps to avoid risk as much as possible. So, for example, we shot in the dry season, which was very specific timing. Like, the shoot was scheduled in a very specific way because we knew if we had to slide into summer, our exteriors would just be hosed because it would just rain nonstop monsoon season for months. So we had to shoot. We made sure to shoot all of our exteriors early, so that by the time we got to April, we were mostly shooting interiors, which were unaffected by weather. So just things like that, like all of that factors into the planning process and the prep process. But there is always an element of unpredictability when shooting in nature and in the elements, and you just have to deal with it and deal with the elements and deal with the heat and deal with being wet and just accept being uncomfortable for a little bit and fantasize about the shower at the end of the day, which it definitely is a strong motivator.
And also, I guess in Thailand, the tom yum and the mango sticky rice. I don't know if you guys had that. I mean, you guys spend a long time there. I love Thai food. I don't know about you. It's amazing.
I love it. I love Thai food. I mean, we definitely got a little, we got our fill at a certain point. The catering on set, they had the Thai catering and they had the Western catering. They were next to each other.
Right.
But you could choose. Do you want the Thai food or the whatever Western food they made? And I would definitely say that a lot of the crew slid towards the Western food as the shoot went on.
Towards the end.
Well, just by nature of it's like, how many times can you have Thai basil chicken? Like, in a row. And I love Thai basil chicken, but at some point you're like, I've had enough Thai basil chicken. Maybe I should have some meatballs.
I totally get that, man. I don't know. I feel like, especially because the food is really spicy as well. And if it's hot, I don't know. When we lived in Malaysia, it took a really long time for us to adapt to the food because it was so hot. And then they're eating these hot soups. I'm like, how are you guys? I'm sweating as I'm eating it.
I don't know
how you guys are doing it.
I know the soup. The soup was not really my thing because of the heat. I was like, the soup was great when we're shooting on an air-conditioned interior. Tom yum is perfect. But like when we're outdoors, it's 100% humidity. I don't know how they do it. They also they wear long sleeves to protect themselves from the sun. And that's also something I'm like, how do you do it? The Thai crew, because I would always show up every day with short shorts and short sleeves, and you're still sweating. So I'm just amazed at what you can tolerate when you're used to those environments. Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. I have one really exciting one. What was the most challenging day for you on set? Like the day where you're like, holy shit, I don't know how to solve this. I'm going to figure it out. And you eventually did. But what was the most challenging one for you?
I think the most challenging lighting setup was the night exteriors. Like that was definitely something. And night exteriors are always hard because they require when you're shooting it in the daytime, you already have a light source. So it's actually quite easy once you've sort of accepted that, everything's going to revolve around the sun. So everything else that we're doing, whatever we're adding, modifying, taking away, adjusting, I mean, not to say that that's easy to do, to curate and control the sun, but at least you're starting from something. At night, there's no light. So you have to artificially create it, but the difficulty on this project was we wanted everything to feel naturalistic and real. So night exterior has stumped filmmakers for decades, for many, many years, because you can't really recreate what nighttime feels like and looks like, because the human eye works in such a strange way, and the way it adjusts to darkness and exposure and all these things. So it's quite tricky. And also camera sensitivity is a factor, but this was another big advantage of the FX3 is it can actually shoot in very low light situations. So that helped us a lot. So we landed on an approach that we thought was going to work, but the first time that we actually did it on set, was definitely nerve-wracking, because honestly, that was something we didn't really get to test properly. Because the proper way to test the night lighting is you have to go out onto a location with no light in order to try it. But we were prepping in Bangkok, so there's light everywhere. So we can't, and we basically, in order to properly test it, we needed to like drive out into the countryside in the middle of the night with all of our equipment and everything, and it's just logistically just doesn't make sense. So we didn't, and we tested it in Bangkok, and we're like, well, we think that this will work on location, but we're not really going to know until we get there. So that first night exterior was quite nerve-wracking, and that was in the first week of production. So at least it came quickly. and we sort of got it out of the way. And of course, once we did it once, then you become very confident in that approach for the next time. But yeah, I think that, so it maybe wasn't a difficult day, but it was certainly nerve-wracking. But we got through it, and thankfully the plan worked.
Were you shooting all the night exteriors during the sunset time, so you had a little bit of light, or no, absolute darkness? Wait for the sunset
there's
to
a
finish?
mix. There's a mix. So there's a lot of scenes in the movie that are shot at blue hour at dusk, but then there's others that are shot at full nighttime. So it's a mixture.
So the ones that are during blue hour, you have a very short window in Southeast Asia, especially because it wouldn't take that long for the blue hour to finish.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Every day you
our
only
gaffer
have...
called it blue 15 minutes.
Okay,
It's not blue hour. It's blue 15 minutes. Well, this is where having the small camera came into play, because being able to move so quickly and have that small footprint allowed us to maximize every minute of that blue hour. So we were never wasting time. Like, we basically wouldn't cut the camera. I mean, once the sun disappeared and we got into that dusky time, we'd basically just roll the camera and then shoot until you couldn't see anything anymore. And get as much footage as we can. And then we had 80 shoot days. So that is 80 blue hours, which is not bad. It adds up.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at how much of that material is in the movie, it's a handful of scenes. So, it goes back to planning, and we would shoot them over multiple nights sometimes if we needed more time and that kind of thing. Yeah.
There was, Faraz, I want to highlight this. There was one of the scenes that when I watched the behind the scene and I realized the Grand Canyon that the van is driving right through it is just a 3 foot by 3 foot.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah, that part. We're gonna overlay the video on the podcast.
Have to see that. You guys lied to us.
Yeah, where did that come from?
I think what that came from is, I don't know if you guys have had this, but like when I was a kid, and I think a lot of creative people when they're kids, like, I can speak for myself. Like when I was a kid, I would pretend that the woods behind our elementary school, which were, just very basic, like small woods, was Endor. The forest moon of Endor, where the trees are gigantic. And you would have your Star Wars toys. So when you place your Star Wars toys next to a regular tree, the tree looks massive, like the scale, you can kind of play with scale in that way. Or, anytime you're building a sand castle and you're like, you're pretending that you're building this huge thing, but it's actually small. So I think just using that sort of childlike imagination, like I think many filmmakers and many artists probably just still have that. I certainly do. I feel like I do. You just have you still have that kind of childish, like childlike way of looking at environments and the world. And it's very imaginative. And so I think that was sort of just, we noticed that on the Scout. We were walking around this rocky terrain, and both Gareth and I noticed, especially because there were actually these like trickles of water that were trickling down through it, and they looked like massive rivers on this huge environment. Like it looked like something you would see in Iceland. And we both commented like, oh wow, doesn't this look like this massive landscape, and we're just flying overhead. And then Gareth had the idea like, oh, when we come back, we should shoot some of this as plates, because maybe we could use it for visual effects shots. So it wasn't necessarily specifically planned. It was like we just shot a few shots of the landscape, and then turns out that there was a use for that. Yeah, so
it's
it was
amazing.
Really cool.
I love that.
It's just imagination.
I loved watching that. I mean, when me and Farad figured that out after we watched the behind the scenes, we were amazed by that. It's amazing. And I agree with you. I think the imagination is so important, especially in your role, right? The roles that you guys play. Yeah. And it helps so much as well. And people don't realize it, right? Because you're watching the movie, you're so immersed, especially when the VFX is amazing. You don't really notice. You're just immersed. The story's great. It looks beautiful. So it just passes by. You don't notice it. And then later you figure it out. And it's even more amazing after you figure out how you guys did it. That's why going back to why the behind the scenes is so important, because people get to see these things and they're like, oh my God, that's the best problem solving I found. Like that's what I want to do. It inspires people to do the same.
Exactly. And it's a magic trick. And, you know, people love seeing how magic tricks are done. Even though, you know, when it comes to actual magic, that's considered a faux pas because you want to maintain the illusion and the trickery. But with filmmaking, I think especially for people who are interested in it, the revealing the magic trick, I think, is part of the fun and learning about it. So I really enjoy that.
Can I ask you a question about the robots, simulants, and all that? It's very interesting because from, you know, we watched even the corridor video where Gareth Edwards was on, and, you know, they were talking about how only afterwards you guys decided on who's going to be, you know, turned, not beforehand, right? You guys shot humans, and then later on you guys made that decision. How much more difficult did that make your job in terms of knowing, okay, so if this guy is going to be turned, then I probably need better lighting on him, right? Because we might need to track his face. I feel like that might have been kind of, well, stressful at times for you. How did you overcome that? What was the solution in that scenario?
Well, the fun thing about that decision is that it had the opposite effect. Is that it made it so that we just didn't worry about it at all.
Wow.
Because that was sort of the point. The point was we're just going to shoot everything as naturalistically as possible without taking into account, like, oh, well, if this person needs to be tracked, then we need to get more light on them. We didn't want to do that because the minute you start doing that, things start to feel artificial. Because the minute you start to be driven by technical needs, you abandon naturalistic needs and realism in favor of that. So that's why we didn't really shoot with green screens. That's why we didn't decide which people, well, aside from the main characters, of course, which background characters were going to be simulants and which ones weren't, because that lended to the authenticity of the whole thing. Both and from my perspective, it lended to the authenticity of the lighting. Like, you know, that person who happens to be standing in the background, who happens to be in shadow, that's probably the most interesting person to turn into a simulant because it's unexpected, because it's just a throwaway. It's like somebody that you barely even see. So that's sort of what went into it, and that is why they wanted to choose after the fact, was so that it would feel random and not deliberate. And so it didn't actually affect anything I did at all. It made it was the opposite. It made it so that I just wasn't even thinking about that, which is great.
Wow.
I love that. That sounds awesome. And you can also notice that magic when you watch it. Yeah. I do have one question though.
Yes.
Was there any shot that you guys took that couldn't be tracked after the fact? Like the guys came out like, we can't track this shot. Like it's too dark or something like that.
Not that I know of. I think they did.
They nailed it then.
They nailed every single shot. I mean, it's incredible work. It really is. And, you know, no disrespect to Godzilla -1, but I do think that the team should have won the best visual effects Oscar. It's unbelievable work. Like if you really see what went into it, it's even more unbelievable what they were able to accomplish. So
I
anyway,
100% agree with you. One of my favorite scenes was the part that the robots start running on the bridge and it will explode after 10 or 15 seconds.
Oh, that was amazing.
The entire run on the bridge. And then when I look at the behind the scene, and when I look at the behind the scene, there was a guy with a 3-meter pole on his backpack and he's running, and there were real explosive in place. That shot was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I agree.
Super fun. I love stuff like that. Everything we shot had a practical element that the VFX team would use as a reference. So, you know, like for example, you could totally shoot that scene on the bridge without a guy running.
Yep.
And then you would just decide where to put it later. But for whatever reason, just having a guy running, it influences, you know, the camera movement, and the other characters react to it and so on. It's just much easier to react to something than it is to react to just to pretend. And so it's helpful to have that reference even when the plan is to completely remove that reference and replace it. But I think it is really helpful.
You know, I want to talk to you about something that we spend a lot of time working on, which is Unreal Engine. That's one of the softwares that we use heavily. And as you are already aware, it's used a lot in filmmaking nowadays, especially in the pre-production stage where they recreate environments and they light the scenes before going to those environments physically to test shots. In this case, because you guys did such an amazing and cool approach as to going into the tech scout, really doing the test footages, making sure the movie works, you know, by testing rigorously. I don't know if you guys use Unreal Engine at all in the workflow, but I just want to know, first of all, what do you think about that workflow specifically? Actually, before I ask my question, I have to ask, did you guys use Unreal Engine at all in the pre-production phase to check out some of the scenes, like recreate them?
Yeah, we didn't, but we did use Unreal Engine on the so we did shoot on the volume for 2 scenes.
Yes.
Towards the end of the movie, so those environments were created in Unreal, but we didn't use it in pre-production for scouting. I love that though. I love the software, and I love that workflow, and I love the idea of being able to do that. I mean, honestly, to me, the thing is location work is relatively easy lighting-wise because, again, you have the sun. So you're already relying on a fixed lighting source, and it's actually not very difficult to. All you need to really do, at least for me, is show up to a location and then plan the lighting approach based on what you observe. So recreating it in Unreal for certain circumstances is helpful. Like I know Greg did a little bit of that on Dune Part 2, and it was for a very specific use, which was actually relying on the sun, but they were shooting in rocky outcroppings of a sand dune, and the shadows played an important part of the story. Now, what's difficult about that is the shadows are obviously quite different from when you scout to when you're shooting months later. So what they used Unreal for was to calculate what the shadows would look like on that location in 4 months to then plan out their shots. So that's a very specific use of on-location recreation to plan lighting. Where I see it as being extremely useful is planning sets. So if you're building a set on a stage, being able to pre-light and pre-plan your lighting approach for a set in Unreal is so unbelievably helpful. Like, it's just incredible because you don't have to play guesswork at all. I mean, the difference, of course, of a location and a set is from a set you're starting from scratch, and there usually isn't really a set. I mean, the sets are often built right up to the time when they're filmed because that's how the rhythm of film production goes. So you don't really have an existing location to go into and scout and look at what the lighting looked like and make adjustments and make plans. It has to entirely be planned in advance. So being able to recreate an environment fully in Unreal, which production designers do anyway, because when you're designing a set, you already have a 3D asset anyway. So it's the easiest thing in the world to port that into Unreal, or just use Unreal from the get-go and light that set and go through the experimentation phase virtually. Try things out, like what does this lighting look like? What does this lighting look like? And actually, I have a potential upcoming project where I'm hoping to actually do that. So we'll see. It's not official yet, but I'm very much hoping to integrate that into it. Yeah.
That's amazing to hear. Thanks so much for sharing that, because again, I know more and more people are using Unreal Engine, and that's why I was so curious to find out. I understand that it's used a lot in volumes, on the volume, but I wanted to know if that would also help the locations that you guys were scouting, if you guys could recreate that and set up lighting earlier. But I love the way you talked about that and described that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could be helpful for location work. The thing is, our filmmaking approach was so guerrilla and spontaneous that I don't think it really would have leveraged it much. But if we were shooting something a little bit more traditional, with planned shots and all of that, one way that would really benefit from that is if you LiDAR scan a location when you scout it, and then recreate that space in Unreal. Then you could go into those environments and even figure out, for example, like how much dolly track do I need in order to get this shot, or where do I need to place track in order to get this frame in the location? Like, how can I back up? And then also planning lighting. Like, I could totally see myself doing that on another project. It's just this one, the specific filmmaking approach was so kind of loose and spontaneous that I don't know if it would have really helped us much, but I think it's really cool. Yeah. And there were so many locations too, probably too many to do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, actually, if you guys were to do all of those locations,
no,
oh my god,
well, we wouldn't have had time.
But I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had time.
No way.
For any aspiring cinematographer who's listening now or watching, what do you think makes a good cinematographer?
I think there's good cinematography. Well, another mentor of mine, Reed Morano, who I worked with during film school, she always had a saying that I'm sure was borrowed from someone else as well, but which was that cinematography is split very neatly into thirds. And 1/3 of it is art, craft, creativity, and that's one side of things. And I think any good cinematographer any good cinematographer is good at all three things. But, all of them are important. They're all pillars of cinematography. So having a good eye, having good taste, being good at the craft, understanding the tools and technology, understanding film language, all of that's important. And then the second pillar is diplomacy. You have to know how to work with people, work with crew, work with producers, negotiate, understand human dynamics, understand leadership, understand, all of these things that are equally as important. They really factor into the role because you are a leader, you are a department head, and you are, so it's important to understand those dynamics and to be well versed in them. And then the third pillar is psychology, where you have to be the director's best friend, confidant, supporter, shoulder to cry on, person who, I do believe that it is the third pillar of cinematography is really just being there for the director and being there for what they need and providing those needs for them, being the support system and helping them achieve their vision, and translating it to visuals and translating it to the crew and communicating with the producers and the production with what they need and supporting them. So, and talking them off a ledge when they don't believe in something or when they're feeling down or when they're lacking or when they're doubting themselves or whatever. So all three are equally
a degree in
important,
psychology would help then, I assume, right? If a cinematographer has some extra time, a degree in psychology might be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know if Freudian psychology specifically is really going to help you, or if being well-versed in Carl Jung is necessarily what you need, but you do need people skills, and you do need to,
absolutely,
you need to know how to understand people. And more importantly, you just need to be an open person. You need to open yourself emotionally, mentally, to the director and to another person and to the crew and really understand how those dynamics work.
Any specific resources that you use to help you learn all of this? I mean, you mentioned some of the books that you studied early on. Any of them that you're willing to share that you think would be helpful to people watching and listening?
I mean, too many to name. I should just
your
go
favorites.
I should just go to my bedroom. I should go to my shelf New Cinematographers, Blaine Brown Cinematography, the Cinematographer's Manual, every issue of American Cinematographer. People should be subscribed and read every month. So many resources online, so many YouTube channels, so many resources. I mean, I love Patrick Tomaso. I love Thomas Flight. I love Corridor Crew are great for visual effects. I love there's other books that have kind of collected interviews with cinematographers that are really great to read. Shot Deck is an amazing resource,
yes, for sure,
for reference images and studying. Watching movies, going out into nature, taking photos every day. Inspiration comes from everywhere. I have a lot of photo books, still photography books. So yeah, it's hard to even know where to start, but I guess where I would start nowadays is I would Google search best books about cinematography, and usually it's the same ones that pop up, and those are the ones that I read, I'm sure. So Yeah.
And I would add your Instagram page to all of that.
Oh,
at the
yeah,
end.
100%.
Yeah, that definitely is helpful.
Happy to contribute
Farhad.
in the small way that I can.
No, it's honestly, it's great. And I definitely recommend everybody watching and listening check it out. And thanks so much for sharing that list. I'm sure a lot of people will be jumping on top of that.
Yep.
We have to talk about one more thing
Yes.
today. And that is about something that I saw you post about on your story. And I'm going to give a little bit of context to everybody. It was about a documentary series, a crime documentary series of something called What Jennifer Did. And
On Netflix.
on Netflix. I haven't actually watched it myself, but apparently she was convicted for murder. And there's this part where they're showing her, I think somebody's talking about her and talking about how she was happy and confident before being convicted of murder. And they're showing a photo of her being all happy. Apparently that photo was generated by AI, and it's been pissing a lot of people off. I assume it's pissed you off a little bit as well. I want to know where you stand on this, because this is just the early days. I mean, this is only going to grow, right? There's so many more AI models coming out, so many more people using them. And it's not necessarily the AIs itself. It's mostly the people using them,
The
and
application,
how people use them. So I want to know where you stand on this and what you thought about it when you first heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two separate things going on here. There's the micro issue of this specific documentary, and then there's the broader issue of generative AI. The micro issue of the documentary is, I think, whether or not the image was generated with an AI generator, Midjourney or whatever, there is a core unethical act of faking something and passing it across as real. So let's say if a documentary came out 10 years ago that did this without AI, but with Photoshop, that would be just as bad.
Yes.
We just had this conversation before. Wow, you mentioned an important point.
Yeah, because the issue here is ethics. It's not about the technology, because the ethics of passing across something as real that is not real, I think is not controversial. Like, people talk about the risks of generative AI with regards to disinformation, fake news, faking clips of people saying things they didn't say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's been a problem forever. Like, people have, as early as, digital, and not digital, as early as laboratory, photography, retouching, you could create fake news, and they did. There were issues of fake images, fake sound bites, manipulated audio, manipulated photographs, going back to the dawn of those technologies in the 1800s and 1900s. And all throughout that process, people have had to play whack-a-mole with calling out, fake things that are being passed across as real. And I think this is no different. I do think Gen AI poses a unique threat because of how good it is at faking things, or at least how kind of convincing it is to the untrained eye. Of course, the trained eye, I think, can see where the faults of these things are. But to the untrained eye, I mean, just open Facebook now, and it's like all you see is just people commenting on very obviously AI images, being like, "Oh my God, so cute," and it's like, it's not real. So, and that's obviously, I guess, a more innocent example, but or not innocent, but harmless, I guess, because it's like people commenting on some fake AI image of an animal, doesn't really hurt anybody. But when it comes to ethics in journalism and documentary and truth telling, I think that's unambiguous. That should be called out and criticized. The larger issue of Gen AI is this, for me at least. I have zero issues, and in fact, I am very much in favor of any tool and any technology that comes along that makes a workflow more efficient and simpler. For example, generative AI in Photoshop, I use quite a bit, and it's quite useful because what it does is it takes what would normally be a tedious task. For example, there was an image a photo that I took just the other day of a couple family members, lovely portrait, and there's this really ugly car in the background. And so what I would have done up until now is,
I thought for a second you were gonna say there was this ugly family member.
But it's funny that you bring that up, because now we're entering, the moral gray zone. Removing a car from the background of a photo because it's distracting is something I would have done 10 years ago. I would have used Clone Stamp and other tools that exist in order to do it manually, and it would take a few minutes.
Yeah.
And now I can select it and go to generative fill and say remove the car, and it extrapolates it basically does the Clone Stamp for you. I have no issue with that. I don't think there's any fundamental problem with that. In fact, I think that just frees up more time for me to do creative things that I want.
Yes.
So anything like that, anything like what I just described, obviously in visual effects, color grading, tracking, rotoscoping, modeling, texturing, like all of these are tedious processes that technology can improve and make more efficient, and make it so that we can spend more time on being creative and less time on menial, tedious tasks. So all of that I actually support. I mean, I'm strongly in favor of embracing technology and making processes more efficient. What I cannot get behind is the concept of replacing the act of creativity with an algorithm, because it is fundamentally in opposition to the purpose of creativity, which is to express human emotion and express something from within ourselves. So, I just honestly and fundamentally, I don't understand the point. I don't understand the point of saying, hey, instead of going out and taking a camera and experiencing the world and seeing something interesting and finding a composition and taking a few photos and trying things out and exploring and finding, I can just go home and type in some words and it can generate the image. To me, it just defies the entire purpose of the act of creating an image, because the act of creating an image is not just to have a final image. It's the act of expression. It's the act of seeing something, finding that inspiration, looking for the composition. That is the act of creation. It's not the final image. It's the whole process that went into it. And the same goes for illustration. The same goes for painting, drawing, filmmaking, cinematography, visual effects. All of it is there's an intentionality to the act that is lost when you just type some words into an algorithm, and then the algorithm averages out the appearance of those keywords in millions of images that it's scraped from the internet, and then determines, well, that word is often associated with this kind of image, and so I'm going to recreate and generate an image that would match this description if it was done in reverse. That's not creativity. That's reverse image search, but fancier. And so I just don't understand the desire to embrace that kind of technology. I fundamentally don't understand it. And this applies also to music. It applies also to anything. And so that's my fundamental problem with it is so now setting aside the documentary problem, because again, that's like an unethical use of it, whether or not, whatever you think about the technology, it's an unethical use. But I also think it's not only an unethical use, it's also it's a use that defies the purpose of art and creativity to, for example, use AI to generate a poster for a movie. Because what's the point? A poster is a work of art. It's a piece. It's a visual piece of art. And there is an intentionality behind the design of such a thing. So if you're just letting an algorithm design it, and I use design here with, that's doing a lot of work, because the algorithm isn't designing anything, which is sort of part of the point. There's no creative act happening. There's no intelligence involved. It's an average. It's numbers. It's guesswork. It's a slot machine of of, well, I guess this word correlates with this type of image. That's not creativity. And that's setting aside the legal issues with AI right now, with where the data's from, what images
don't get me started on
source
that.
was scraped from the internet and from who. And I think that stuff ultimately is going to be resolved in the legal system anyway. So eventually that'll be resolved. And by the way, once that's resolved, and let's say we reach a point where it is definitively determined that AI generators cannot scrape copyrighted material without compensation. And if the companies are saying, well, if we need to compensate, then we won't be able to sustain our business model, then to me, that means that this is not a technology that can exist in its current form if that's what's required. There's also issues with data usage, storage, energy consumption, all of these things. And I think we are very much at the beginning of it, but I'm not really sure we're at the beginning of its capabilities as a technology. I think we're at the beginnings of maybe understanding what the limitations are of the technology, and we'll see how that parses out in the next few years. My ultimate hope, if I had my way, I would just get rid of the whole thing, honestly. I think the world would be better without it, but we'll see what happens. It's hard to see a net positive for any of it, honestly. It feels to me like it's just making everything a little bit worse. And that includes ChatGPT, that includes all of it. Like AI chatbots, I think, are just fundamentally worse than just talking to a person. ChatGPT is demonstrably fundamentally worse than looking things up on your own because it does not have intelligence. It generates false nonsense. I mean, I'll give you one example, and then I'll get off my soapbox. Instagram recently replaced the search function with Meta AI, which is their version of ChatGPT. It's a chatbot.
Yes.
Why? I don't know. Well, I do know, to push it to Meta users so that they can start using it, so that it can scrape more data, so that it can get better. Anyway, out of pure curiosity, I clicked it, and it shows you a few suggestions of like, here's some things you can search for. So I clicked one of them. I searched for top 10 television dramas of the 2000s. So I clicked that. Now, when I Google or search engine, because Google also sucks now, but when I search engine top 10 television dramas, what will pop up are websites, blogs, critics, things where various different lists where people have written their subjective opinion of what the top 10 television dramas are. And I can click them. I can see like, oh, Vulture. I like Vulture's writing about pop culture. I bet their list would be interesting. Let me click and see what they said. What Meta AI does, it's a generative AI. So it's not leading you to existing resources. It's just it has scraped the internet and is now generating what it thinks the answer to top 10 television dramas would be if you were to search for it. And again, I'm using thinks here it's doing a lot of heavy lifting because it's not thinking.
Yeah.
It's just averaging out what the results of this kind of search would be. And the results were as follows. I don't remember exactly, but I have a screenshot somewhere. Arrested Development, The Office, Grey's Anatomy, Family Guy, Parks and Recreation, NCIS, etc. Now, you'll already notice two things. One, none of these would be on anybody's list of best dramas. And the other thing is that half of them are comedies.
Yeah.
And this was the first thing I clicked and used to just try out Meta's generative AI. And from first impression, I can say I think it's a useless hunk of shit. but so when I see that, and I see how much these companies are embracing this and kind of pushing it down our throats as users, I worry because I think it's all bad. Like, I just think it's a lowering of the quality level that we would expect from human curation, human creativity, human writing, human expression, etc. So where I'm at with it right now is my biggest hope is that all of these companies' biggest fears about financial solvency come true, and they all just abandon this project like they abandoned the metaverse and like they abandoned NFTs and like they abandoned all these other nonsense, useless things that nobody wanted. We'll see if I'm right, but it's impossible to predict. But as of right now, I am pretty much firmly anti-generative AI, which is Midjourney, Sora, ChatGPT, etc. Now, leveraging the technology to improve our creativity, I'm all for it, but we'll see if maybe people will wise up and realize that that's going to be more useful to people than replacing things that were already working and good with things that are just less good. I don't know.
No, I
Rant
love that.
over.
No, it's a very interesting point because at some point you mentioned about ChatGPT, and I think we had this conversation with Faraz. Whenever we receive an email and it's obvious that the person used ChatGPT, the credibility for us
Feast
immediately.
your eyes. I've seen that freaking phrase in 10 different freaking texts right now. Feast your eyes. I swear to God,
Like,
that's a ChatGPT thing.
And then the credibility immediately drops for whoever the email that we are receiving. So the moment we think about that, the person didn't even want to put some effort to write the email, even if they want to get hired, if they want to be partner, if they want to use us as a partner. Immediately we are like, okay, if they don't want to spend 10 minutes to write an email to introduce themselves, and they are sending us these buzzwords that every ChatGPT can spit it out, for us the credibility has dropped.
Bingo. Exactly. I'll give you another short anecdote. A friend of mine went to a wedding recently. Sorry, no, it wasn't a wedding. It was a gala. It was a fundraiser. And the head of the nonprofit gave this speech, and my friend's a writer. And my friend said the speech was pretty bad. It was all just it was just the most generic, cliche, platitudes imaginable, lame jokes. It wasn't good. And afterwards, the guy asked him, hey, so what did you think of the speech? And so my friend, to be polite, said, "Oh, well, it was pretty good." And this guy who gave the speech is not a writer, so you wouldn't really expect him to write something eloquent or anything. So considering that, my friend was kind of like, "Oh, well, he wrote some jokes and some platitudes. They're all corny and cliche and stereotypical and bad, but at least he wrote them." And then the guy smugly said, well, actually I had ChatGPT generate the speech for me. And then immediately you're like, oh, well, of course it sucked. And also, not only does it suck, but I've now lost even what little respect I had for you, because I even had a little bit of respect to say well, you're not a good writer, but at least you tried.
You tried.
And now
Yes.
it's you didn't even try. You just gave up. You took the laziest possible route of, you had an opportunity in a speech to express yourself and your feelings towards another individual that you were honoring, and you couldn't even put in the minimum amount of effort for that person to express yourself. And I think that's very telling about a person. So I agree with you guys, and I guess we'll see where that goes if it does become something that's more widely accepted and used in society. I don't know what that says about us. I guess we'll find out, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that.
Yes.
I'm worried about the
specifically
laziness, and the yeah.
Exactly. That's the point.
For
that
the
I'm-
next generation.
It would be extremely difficult to learn something new.
Yeah.
Even, for example, for any software that you use, specifically 3D software, there is a path for you to use coding. So you can use computer programs to write the code. If the future students always use any sort of GPTs or generative AI to come up with those codes, they will never learn the logic. They will never learn the concept. They will never learn the basic. And if one day that thing is not there, they cannot do anything.
Exactly. Now, again, here's another example where for me, it's this is a good use of it. If you write a code and then use an AI software to debug, I think that's
Amazing.
great. That's super useful for an individual coder who's making stuff on their own, needs somebody to check their work. Maybe there's an error that you can't find. I took one semester of computer science in freshman year of high school because all my family are computer scientists. So I was like, well, I'll give it a try. So we were learning C++, and I was terrible at it. I mean, just awful. Writing code, I would always make one little mistake somewhere and then run the program and it wouldn't work and I would never be able to find it. So, little things like that, little things that help us in our daily lives and enhance our experience and our productivity and our creativity, I think is great. But anything that completely replaces the process of learning and creating and expressing, I think is a one-way train to a society that I don't think any of us want to live in. And my hope is that people will realize that. Like, I hope that, you guys, myself, like we all probably have more exposure to generative AI tools than the average person, just because we work in a media field and in technology. So this is all in our wheelhouse. And even we are already, experiencing like what some people have coined the enshittification of these processes, and have a negative reaction to it. So I hope that more people will, as well, as it becomes more widespread, or that these business models really just don't work, and eventually they just move on to something that they can actually make money off of, and that's that, and call it a day. We'll see.
And for anybody who's watching and listening who wants to know a little bit about the scraping of data, I recommend you check out the interview with the CTO of OpenAI and the CEO of YouTube when they asked them about Sora, and they both couldn't answer anything. They were like, I don't know. You have to ask the other person about that.
How can the CTO doesn't know the source of data?
About the source of data for Sora?
They know. Of course they know.
They know.
Bullshit.
They know. They definitely know. Yeah.
They know. And I think that this will all eventually come out. There will be government will get involved. There will be hearings, and there will also be litigation and in courts. But we'll see. It's like you said, it's early, and those processes take time.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm tracking it. I'm monitoring it. But what I can say confidently for myself is, much like how a generation of filmmakers, Chris Nolan, Spielberg, P.T. Anderson, like all these directors, they came up shooting film, and that's what they know and that's what they like. And they took a look at the digital revolution in cinematography and filmmaking that came about in the 2000s and the 2010s. Something that I've very much embraced, digital tools and all that. They took one look at that and said, no, thank you. I'm good with my current process. That's how I feel about integrating certainly generative AI into any of my workflows. I look at it and say, not for me.
No, thank
no,
you.
Thank you. I like
thank you.
Yeah, I like the way that I
it is.
currently make movies.
Yeah.
I would rather not, sit in a room typing prompts into a slot machine and hoping that it'll generate the shot that I want. And I know there will be some of that, at least for now. Like, people will try it, but not for me.
Well, let's put it this way. If we don't have the apocalypse and we are going to do that thing where in 10 years we'll have another podcast episode,
Well,
we'll look back and see how it all happened. We'll see where the data came from, and then we'll see how people are using it, the next generation. And I think it'll be a really fun conversation.
I think that'll be very interesting to see.
Well, Oren, can I lock you down for 2035 or something like that? Are you gonna be
Well,
free?
I'll put it on my calendar right now just to make sure it's in my schedule.
Please tell your AI chatbot to do that for you. I appreciate that.
Will do, yes. By then, hopefully, I'll have just a full-on, robot like in the Jetsons, and that I would 100% get behind.
Well, awesome, man. Oren, you've been amazing. I truly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the luck there is for the next things you're gonna do.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. It was a great chat. Thank you.
Awesome. For everybody watching and listening, thank you guys so much as well. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Until then, ciao.